It'll take time to restore chaos.
The past year since the Switch 2 came out, I felt absolutely no pressure to get one, especially since I upgraded my laptop and got into PC gaming. All my favourite games are still on the Switch. Most of the ones that are coming to Switch 2 are either also on Switch or PC, and the few that weren't really very interesting to me. At this point in time, it would really take a miracle for me to pick one up this early in its life cycle, at a point where tech prices are already going through the roof.
アニマは世界の源であった。水も火も風も。
この剣の名に恥じぬよう精進します。
これからのあなたの学院生活のすべてがその意志と共にあると思ってください。
学の限界を教えてあげる。
6つの太陽に照らし出された大地。そこで人々は知ることになる。破れた神の恨みが未だ晴らされてはいないことを。
Check your forecast for flying pigs. Xenoblade Genesis is coming out, and I am very excited, very surprised, and if I'm being honest, maybe a little trepidatious, but for the same reasons I am excited. We'll get into that. I've been very excited for the future of Xeno ever since Xenoblade 3 and its expansion wrapped up the overall plot of the Chronicles games, with XDE sneaking in towards the end to snip off those final few lingering threads. I still have yet to go through Xenogears and the Xeno Saga games, though I'm planning on starting soon, but I am familiar enough with them to know that for the past 25 odd years, series creator Tetsuya Takahashi has, in one way or another, been trying to tell a similar story with his games, but kept getting cut off. Xenogears was originally just one in media res episode of this insane grand epic, but never got off the ground, and Xeno Saga had to be ended halfway through its initial plan of 6 games. The Xenoblade Chronicles games were the first time he actually got to properly finish something on his own terms, with all the games and their various expansions not only managing to tell their own distinct stories, but also pushing forward and adding to an overarching narrative that eventually climaxed in Xenoblade 3, and that's something I've always loved about the games. I remember in the lead up to Xenoblade 3 being worried that, as the series started to become increasingly self-referential, even more so than usual, and talking of wrapping up the Klaus trilogy, I was worried that the series would get so lost in its own lore that it would get to a point where it was no longer able to tell an original story with distinct characters anymore. Thankfully, in that instance, I was wrong. Xenoblade 3 is a fantastic standalone game, my favourite in the series in fact, that does manage to conclude the series' narrative and themes while still telling its own story with its own characters, largely by shoving most of the burden of fan service onto its expansion, Future Redeemed. And don't get me wrong, I love that game as much as any other Xenoblade game, but if there's one thing I would say definitely makes me glad its scenario wasn't the one picked for the main game, it's how much its original characters had to fight for space with series legacy ones, like Shulk, Rex, and Alvis in his myriad gender fucked forms. Which is why Xenoblade Genesis interests me so much, and not just because it finally gives the localizers an excuse to drop the Chronicles subtitle they've been stuck with. Genesis, at least from this brief glimpse we've been afforded, is different, no getting around that. There's a reason people have been calling it Xenoblade 3 Houses. Aesthetically, this leans harder into straight fantasy than even the relatively rustic first few chapters of the OG Xenoblade. I'm sure there's going to be some sci-fi twist. I'm like 99% sure that the world of Anstar takes place in some kind of Dyson sphere or O'Neill tube, and I'm already seeing speculations of Logos/Malos Xenobladists returning based solely on purple orbs. But in terms of aesthetic and visual style, this is by far the most radically distinct Xeno game yet, and since aesthetics and visuals are all we really have to go off of at this point in time, such a jarring shift has naturally rubbed a few people the wrong way. I mean, not even Xenoblade 2's original reveal and its new style compared to Xenoblade 1 and X was this different. Without the title drop or Kozumi literally saying, "This is the future of Xenoblade," I wouldn't have recognized it as such. By this point, I trust Takahashi and Monolith's vision. They have literally never steered me wrong before, but even though I went into games like Xenoblade 2 and 3 deliberately with no expectations, so I could appreciate those games on their own terms, those games still kinda had the vague look of Xeno games. Genesis, by comparison, is such a departure, such a radical shift in style and world design. I wouldn't say it's Fire Emblem-like others have been saying. I think you can still tell that these are Monolith Soft models in a Monolith Soft engine, and from the brief glimpses you can see, it does seem to have a similar tone to the other Xenoblade games, but that's it. It is, I think, unfamiliar is the best way to describe it, and because of that, I think it's natural for that to breed a bit of insecurity in longtime fans. I've been a fan of Xenoblade for a decade at this point, and one of the big things that's always drawn me to the games, despite their differences, is that aesthetic that sometimes leans closer to hard sci-fi, other times a more steampunkish science fantasy, and to have that seemingly and suddenly vanish is cause for a little trepidation. I have no idea what to expect, and I kind of love that. I'm of the opinion that in order to truly appreciate something, you need to approach it on its own terms, at its own level. Now, obviously that doesn't mean you can't criticize things, you can, I do, but if you go in bringing your own expectations, your own baggage, you end up disliking it for what it isn't, not what it is. The best experiences with media I've had the past few years has been going to see something that I know next to nothing about and just letting them unfold before me. Sinners, Id Invaded, and even to an extent Xenoblade 3. Like I said, I was pretty trepidatious going into Xenoblade 3, but by detaching myself from my expectations of what I thought a Xenoblade 3 should look like, I was able to appreciate what the game itself was doing, and it ended up being my most enjoyable gaming experience ever and one of my favorite games, period, second only to Signalis. And the reason I bring this up is because Genesis is so different, so much of a clean break, that I essentially have no choice but to abandon any preconceived notions of what a Xeno game is. I have no choice but to approach the game on its own terms that it itself sets, ergo, I have no possible idea what it could do. It could be anything, and that is so fucking exciting. This is the first time in forever that Takashi and Monolith have had what is essentially a blank canvas since what? Soma Bringer, Disaster, Day of Crisis. Was Takashi even involved in that one? And I'm just as excited to be surprised and blown away by them once again. We still have a long time to go until Genesis comes out, so that's a long time to build it up in my head, start predicting things, but when I do finally hold it in my hand, I look forward to just stripping back the ego, slotting it in, and letting the experiment wash over me. Video is over. Check out my new EP. Thanks. Bye. No, I don't wanna burn out, you know I'd rather fade. Tell my landlord, rip the check up. I live my life on stage, my life is survival horror. Good thing I'm Leon K, giving grace to any other who cannot find their way.